before we go into the insects and insect relatives, let's have a look at the last couple of videos that are going to be here. Okay, so we've got a video showing Remipedes, and Remipedes are going to be the crustaceans that are closest to insects. So insects are actually a branch from the same group that gave us Remipedes, which means that insects are technically crustaceans. They are within the group Crustacea. Any other way of describing the group Crustacea would be, you'd be leaving things out. So paraphyletic, only part of a tree. Showing here are some, I just put a couple of interesting ones on here, but there's so many insect videos, and we've seen so many beautiful arthropod videos so far that I think you'll be all arthropoded out by the end of this. Anyway, we've got our mantises doing their defensive posture. I think this is the person that has a whole bunch of mantises, and they look like a little team of ninjas down there. They're really adorable. We've got a praying mantis actually hunting hummingbirds, and in one of these videos, I believe, catching a hummingbird, which is kind of sad, but also kind of cool. Not something you see every day. Down here is one of my old fan favorites. This is army ants versus crab. You see the army ants crossing the water and just absolutely demolishing this crab, tearing it apart from the inside out. Spoiler alert, they're going to go for the joints and they're going to go for the eyes. Yeah, ants are just like that. Then you got a lovely hornet colony over here. That's pretty cool. You got some parasitic wasp larvae. So wasps, a lot of wasps actually are parasites. They have to lay their eggs inside of another arthropod, usually an insect, and it grows up inside of that, actually feasting off the guts of that insect as it grows. And in a lot of cases, they can actually burst out, the babies will burst out, and the host won't necessarily die from this, which is pretty crazy, right? And then phorid flies are kind of neat. They are going to be parasites of fire ants. So these are one thing that you can import to areas, and they will attack fire ants, because otherwise fire ants are pretty much indestructible. They are just, pretty ridiculous. Okay, so let's go to the actual PowerPoint, and let's fire this bad boy up and turn on our subtitles. There we go. So this is what Remipedia look like. On the outside, they appear to be very similar to something like a centipede or a millipede, but the mouth parts are different. The mouth parts show them to be just another member of the Crustacea, but they happen to be genetically the closest members of the Crustacea to the insects. They actually share a branch with the insects and nothing else. And so we think these are either insect ancestors or highly modified versions of whatever the stem group is that gave rise to both these and insects, which is kind of neat. At least 17 living species identified, at least of the last time I pulled this out of a journal. I would imagine it's a couple more since then, but still fairly rare and mostly found in undersea caves. Yeah, very weird. And so we are now, so we've done all of these things, the pan-arthropods, we've done the weird arthropods and all these chelicerates down here, that's this branch. We've done the myriapods. We've done all of these crazy crustaceans, which I just lumped in all of these groups together. We've done a little bit of the Remipedes right there, and you can see the Remipedes are the sister branch to our hexapods, our actual insects. So what's going on inside of an ant? Well, have a look. Ants and wasps are actually very similar. So the idea is that ants are probably the original version, and then wasps develop from ants. And you'll know that there are some kinds of ants that actually, the males in particular, will develop wings. An ant with wings is basically a wasp. That's the idea. And they both have that sort of social colonial structure that goes on to varying extents. It varies with the species. But one thing that they have is a little poison gland. So they have poison that they can excrete out of the back. And ants will excrete this. They'll sort of put it onto leaves to kill trees in some cases, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Remipedes also are venomous. So remipedes on the previous slide right back here, yeah, also have venom. And think just like wasps, yeah, venomous. That's what is in those stingers that burn so much when they do sting you. So this is looking at the front end of it. We've got our compound eye there coming directly off the brain. We've got extra little ocelli for extra vision. So even in insects, you do quite often get multiple eyes. It's just that they have one big compound eye that's easier to see just by a regular person. And with something like a grasshopper head like this or a cricket head, you can actually really see those primitive segments. So there's the first segment up there with the antenna coming off of that. The compound eye is actually originating from that segment. That's where the brain is going to be. And then each individual segment as we go down is going to give rise to a different part. So the labrum first, then the mandible, and then our maxillas, and then a labium underneath. And together these are all various spoons and forks basically to put things into the mouth. And so there we go. These are all the parts, and this is how they fit together. Just push those together in the middle. And yeah, it's specialized eating apparatus. I think that's the big key with arthropods. They all have specialized versions of legs that they use for food gathering and sensing where food is. So they are just very well adapted food gathering machines, and that's why they are so plentiful on this planet. They are really good at the science of finding food and making babies. So here's a nice little electron micrograph of the mouth parts of an insect. Have a look at this. Look at those mandibles. Look at that. That's fantastic. Look how they all slot together so nicely. So let's see. In insects, they would also have these Malpighian tubes, just like that. And so they're going to be just like this. And so it's going to act like a kidney. It's going to dump into the intestine. And we're then going to dump it out with the rest of the feces. And so they're cleaning out the blood all the time as they are moving around. And that's what's going on in an ant's abdomen, if you ever see one. This is a parasitic wasp, and so they're going to use their venom gland back here to actually paralyze that larva while they are injecting it. And then they'll have a nice ovipositor, which is a female's egg-laying sword, basically. And the egg's going to travel down those swords and ovipositors, rather, and boop right into the actual body of the caterpillar. And as they're going through their different life stages, the caterpillar, the wasp will be growing in there and developing and getting larger and just swimming around in their organs and eating whatever it chooses. Yeah. And as long as they don't kill their host before it's time for their host to die and them to burst out, then it's fine. And then once they burst out, it doesn't really matter, to the wasp at least, whether the insect lives or dies. All right, so this is what's going on if you get close to the edge of one of these insects. Here we go. Spiracles are going to be the holes through which they breathe. And they're going to have a muscle that can actually pull this closed or open. And so this is why insects don't like to be in the water, because then the water flows in through these little spiracles and then they drown. It doesn't look like they have lungs, but they have these little holes all throughout their body. And the holes will then go down, and each one of these has a little trachea, and basically tracheal epithelium is going to be helping to exchange gas, just like a lung, but a sort of a spread out lung, spread out over a larger area of the body. Bees actually have their own language, which is pretty cool. Their language consists of turns and shakes and a couple other moves. And with these, the orientation that they do these dances and the number of times, so the orientation that they do the dance actually tells you where the food is. It gives you the location information. So they're lining up so that at the center of each little loop, they're going to be pretty much pointing at the food source. And the number of loops they make is going to tell the other bees how far they have to fly in order to get to that hoop. So yeah, bees also have various kinds of chemical communication, and these would be things that we don't understand as well. But the communication in terms of how to find food and the distance and direction, that is actually interpretable. You can watch a bee do its dance, and then you can go out there and you can figure out what that bee found and what it was eating. And it'll also include in its dance some measure, if I remember right, of the quality of the food source. So pretty cool. Yeah. It's like Yelp, basically, but done through the medium of dance. Yeah. By an arthropod. Why not? So here we have some arthropod larvae, and they'll have some interesting features such as gills that are sticking out of the sides and or back, and they'll go through various metamorphoses and, oh, pardon me, turn into something more more reminiscent of what you would see. So things at the top will turn into, for example, stoneflies and mayflies. Things at the bottom are going to turn into something like a butterfly or a moth. And this is going to turn into something like a beetle, this little grub at the bottom. But you can see they each have those 6 legs, even something like a caterpillar will have 6 proper legs. And then there'll be some segments at the back that have these little pro legs. And these are actually more like an onychophoran's little sort of stubby inflatable legs. These are the guys that are going to be the legs in the adult, and these are the proper ones, genetically hardwired. These are more like a temporary leg that they're about to lose during metamorphosis. And so there are different ways of growing up, depending if you're what kind of insect you are. Something like a grasshopper hatches out from an egg, and the tiniest versions actually look like miniature grasshoppers. And they're just going to keep molting and growing bigger, and they'll go through some changes on the inside. You see the proportions of their body change quite a bit. But the overall appearance is very similar to what it was. And then you'll have things like in the Lepidoptera, which are going to be the butterflies and moths, where the egg will hatch out and you'll have something like a caterpillar that'll actually go through several molts. And with each molt, it's actually called a different instar. And each one of these is a minor metamorphosis until it gets to pupation, where it's going to grow this sort of shell around itself and or make a cocoon around that. And just take a little while to change and get things right on the inside. And then bam, it's going to pop out. And remember that while they're going through metamorphosis, they are reorganizing neurons. They're reorganizing legs. It's like a second developmental stage. So whereas human babies develop from the egg and go through several stages, but still inside their mothers, the arthropods are doing that. So they're going from eggs to a little caterpillar, and there are a lot of little intermediate stages in between. And then they're doing it again. They're going back into the pupa form and then coming back out as an adult. So yeah, it's like twice as much metamorphosis as we do. Even though humans do some metamorphosis, it's not as complicated and not as cool as what butterflies do. Okay, there we go. That brings us to the end of arthropods, which I think are wonderful, and I hope you like them too.